The dosage on his chart had been changed sometime between 2:47 and 3:12 in the morning. 25 minutes. That was the window. I knew because I had pulled his labs at 2:47 and the morphine drip was set at the correct rate, 4 milligrams per hour, standard post-surgical. The number I had verified with my own eyes and initialed in the margin with the blue pen I kept clipped to my left breast pocket. And when I came back at 3:12 to hang the replacement saline bag, the chart in the wall bracket said 18 milligrams. 18. My hand went still on the IV pole. In the hallway outside room 744, the night shift was quiet. 2 other nurses were at the station 40 feet away, faces turned toward a monitor, voices low. The private security stationed outside his door. Broad-shouldered men in dark suits who had made every nurse on this floor nervous since Monday were rotating positions. One of them was facing away from me, hand pressed to the earpiece in his left ear. I stood there for 4 seconds, doing the math I'd been doing since my second year of nursing school. The math I had gotten so good at that my professor called it a gift, and my mother called it a curse, and I called it the only thing standing between a patient and a negligent dosage order. 18 milligrams of morphine per hour into a man who had just come out of exploratory abdominal surgery 46 hours ago. His lungs would stop before shift change. I pulled the chart from the bracket, slid it under my arm, and walked to the supply room at the end of the hall. Not fast. You never walk fast in a hospital at 3 a.m. Fast walks get noticed. Fast walks get questions. And I had been making myself invisible in this building for 2 years because that was how I survived. Quiet, steady, present, without being seen. I closed the supply room door behind me and turned the lock. The chart said Dr. Leon Park had authorized the change. The signature was clean and confident, and I had seen Dr. Park's signature on 300 documents in this building, and this was not it. The tail on the K curved the wrong way. The P looped back instead of pressing forward. Someone had practiced it well enough to fool anyone who wasn't paying close attention. I'd been paying close attention since the day a forged signature killed my father. The man in room 714 was going to be dead by 5 a.m. unless I walked out of this supply room and did something that was either the bravest or most catastrophic decision of my nursing career. I pulled the chart against my chest, unlocked the door, and walked straight toward the 4 men in dark suits who had the power to either protect me or end me. World Build Soul Grace Mercy Hospital's private wing was not built for healing. It was built for hiding. The 4th through 8th floors had been a project of the hospital board 8 years ago, a quiet expansion that the public announcement called world-class private patient care and the internal memos called a revenue stream that doesn't ask questions. The rooms were the size of small hotel suites. The equipment was the same as the EQ floors below, but encased in brushed nickel instead of plastic. The hallways were carpeted. The nurses' station on the 7th floor had a small kitchen stocked with imported green tea that nobody drank and good coffee that everyone did. The patients who came here came at night, mostly, and they came with people who didn't explain why they were there. Their charts were flagged with a small yellow sticker that meant, in the language of this floor, ask nothing, document everything, bring concerns only to the attending. I had been working this floor for 9 months. Before that I'd been on the 4th floor, the cardiac unit, where I was good but not invisible enough. Someone had noticed my hands once, noticed the way I flagged a dosage discrepancy 3 minutes before a resident would have administered it, and had me moved up. Better pay. Quieter patients. Fewer questions. I had been counting my blessings wrong. I knew who Kim Jae-won. was the same way everyone in this city knew who Kim Jae-won was, carefully, and from a distance. His name appeared in the business section of the Tribune sometimes, attached to import companies and a hospitality group and a real estate development fund that had purchased and renovated 4 city blocks in the Goyang corridor over the past 6 years. His photograph appeared less frequently, and always at angles that suggested whoever held the camera had been permitted to hold it only briefly. A profile in a business magazine 2 years ago had described him as relentlessly private, arguably the most influential man in Korean-American commerce on the West Coast, and conspicuously uninterested in being written about. What the Tribune did not write about was the other thing. The thing that the 7 men stationed across 2 floors of this hospital made obvious without saying anything at all. He had been brought in Monday at 11 p.m. through the service entrance on the building's north side. I knew this because Maria, the overnight loading dock supervisor, had texted the floor nurse group chat. 1 message, 6 words. 7th floor just got interesting tonight. And then gone quiet. He had come out of surgery Tuesday morning. The chart I had been handed listed the procedure as an emergency appendectomy, which was technically accurate the way calling a hurricane a weather event is technically accurate. The surgical notes were 3 paragraphs of language so clinical and compacted that I had to read them twice to understand that what had actually happened was that someone had put a bullet in his lower abdomen, and the surgical team had spent 4 hours making sure it didn't kill him. He was alive. Someone in this building was trying to... I had been his night nurse for 2 shifts, and he had not looked at me once. Not dismissively, he simply hadn't looked. His eyes, when they were open, moved to the window, to the door, to the faces of the men who rotated in and out of his room with the quiet efficiency of people accustomed to danger as a permanent. He did not speak except in Korean, and only to one man, shorter than the others, wire-rimmed glasses, who stood closest to the door and who the other men deferred to without any visible signal being exchanged. His stillness was not the stillness of a sick man. It was the stillness of a man who had been still for so long that it had become structural, like the quiet at the center of something that had been turning, fast and dangerous, for a very long time. I had noticed his hands. I notice everyone's hands. It's a nurse's reflex. Diagnostic and involuntary. His were large, unmarked by the scars I would have expected, and they lay flat against the blanket at his sides with a deliberateness that told me he was accustomed to controlling what they did even when the rest of him was not in control of much. I had also noticed the way the room changed temperature when the man with the wire-rimmed glasses entered it. Not warmth, not exactly. Something more like charge. The particular static of absolute authority entering a contained space. I had spent 2 shifts not thinking about any of that, and now I was standing outside his door with a forged drug chart pressed against my chest and a decision to make. Inciting collision, the expo's the one nearest the door, was named Choi. I knew his name because he had asked me, on the first night, to confirm my nursing credentials and full name before he would allow me to enter the room, and I had told him my name was Naomi Grant, Earn. And he had said his name was Choi, and that I should not touch the call button inside the room for any reason that was not medical. I said, I need to speak to whoever is in charge. Choi looked at me the way people look at something they are trying to assess for threat level. I was 5'4". I was wearing the standard issue navy scrubs of the 7th floor. I had a penlight clipped to my collar and a chart tucked under my arm, and I had just come off 4 hours of routine rounds. I was, in every visible way, exactly what I appeared to be. Medical concern? He said. Yes, he looked at the chart. He looked at my face. He pressed the earpiece in his left ear. He said something brief in Korean. 30 seconds of nothing. Then the door opened, and the man with the wire-rimmed glasses stepped out. He was smaller than the others, 5'10", maybe, and he dressed differently, charcoal gray where the others wore black, and the quality of the fabric was the kind of quality that didn't announce itself. He looked at me the way a man looks at something that has interrupted him in the middle of something important and is now being evaluated to determine whether the interruption was worth it. "What is the concern?" he said. His English was precise and flat. I handed him the chart. His morphine drip was changed between 247 and 312 am. The current order says 18 milligrams per hour. That dosage, given his post-surgical weight and the current state of his respiratory function, will cause respiratory depression and cardiac arrest within 90 minutes. The signature authorizing the change is forged. He looked at the chart. He looked at me. "How do you know it is forged?" "I've seen Dr. Park's signature on 300 documents. The loop on the P is wrong. The tail on the K curves in the wrong direction. Someone practiced it and got it close, but not close enough." "You noticed that?" "Yes. The stillness that moved through him then was different from the stillness of the men around him. Theirs was trained and physical. His was something older, something that had settled into him at a cellular level. The stillness of a man who had learned that showing a reaction was the same as showing a weapon, and he was not ready to draw yet. "Why are you bringing this to me?" he said. "Why not to the attending?" I looked at him steadily. "Because the attending is Dr. Park. 3 seconds of nothing." "Wait here," he said. He took the chart into the room. I waited. The 4 men around me had not moved, but their quality of stillness had changed. Sharper now. Attention redistributed. The way a room sounds different when everyone in it has just heard something that changes the situation. I kept my hands visible and my breathing even, and I thought about my father, who had died in a hospital not unlike this one, because a nurse had not looked closely enough at a forged number on a drug chart. And I thought about the 18 months I had spent after that, becoming someone who always looked closely. The door opened again. He did not come out. He held the door open and looked at me. "Come in," he said. "CTA Bridge, welcome back, my bold hearts and late-night keepers. If you are new here, find a seat, because this story does not slow down, and neither do we. Make sure you subscribe before we go further, and hit that like button so this story reaches someone who needs it tonight. I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Every time I ask, this family stretches to a new corner of the world, and I love every single one of you for being here. Now, dim the lights. Pull the blanket close, because we're just getting started. Story deepen. Heroine's wound. The room smelled of antiseptic and expensive cedar, and something underneath both of those that was purely human. The scent of a body under pressure, working to repair itself. Kim J1 was watching me from the bed. I had seen his eyes open before on my rounds, but they had never been open and looking at me. Looking at me was different. His eyes were the darkest brown, nearly black in the low light, and the intelligence in them was not the sharp, demonstrative intelligence of someone who wants you to know they are smart. It was the kind of intelligence that simply registers everything and decides later what to do with it. He looked at the chart in the man with the glasses' hand, then back at me. "Sit," the man with the glasses said. It was not unkind, it was efficient. There was a chair against the wall, low and modern, the kind of chair that exists in expensive hospital rooms to tell visitors they are expected to stay a while. I sat in it. I folded my hands in my lap the way my nursing program supervisor had once told me to do when I needed to project calm in a situation where I did not feel calm. The man with the glasses said, in Korean, something brief. Kim J1 said something back. Not brief. His voice, which I had heard only in short responses over 2 nights, was lower than I expected from a man his size. Not soft. Nothing about him was soft, but deep in a way that occupied the air differently than other voices. He looked at me again. "He says you speak Korean," the man with the glasses translated. "Some," I said. "How much is some?" I looked at the man in the bed and answered in Korean, enough to understand what was just said about me. The man with the glasses removed his glasses. He cleaned them with the edge of his jacket. He put them back on. Kim Jae-won's expression did not change. But something in his eyes did. A very slight adjustment. A recalibration. The visual equivalent of a man who has just discovered a room has a door he didn't know about. The man with the glasses said, carefully, he wants to know how a nurse on this floor speaks Korean at that level. I had not told this story in 3 years. I kept it the same way I kept most things that hurt, compressed into the smallest shape it could take without disappearing entirely. Stored somewhere accessible enough that I could find it when I needed it, and sealed tightly enough that it didn't leak. My father was a pharmacist, I said. He worked at a Korean-owned pharmacy in this city for 22 years. He learned the language because his patients deserved to be understood in their own language, and then he taught me because he thought I should understand the world I was going to work in. I paused. He died 4 years ago. In a hospital. Because a nurse didn't look closely enough at a number someone had changed on a chart. The room held that for a moment. Kim Jae-won said nothing. But he was looking at me with a quality of attention I had not experienced before from any patient, any colleague, any person in any room. The attention of someone who had just learned something specific about the structure of a person and was still turning it over in his hands. The pharmacy was Shin's on the Goyong corridor, I said. I don't know if you know it. The man with the glasses was very still. Kim Jae-won said one word in Korean. It meant, I know it. Story deepened. Heroes wound his name in the file on the 7th floor chart system, listed his emergency contact as a holding company. Not a person, a corporate entity. A legal structure, a name that existed on paper for the purpose of routing decisions through layers of authorized agents. The line that usually said spouse, parent, sibling, friend said, in clean digital font, Haesong Capital Partners, LLC, contact, Kim S., authorized representative. I had seen this before in the private wing, men and women who were powerful enough that their personal relationships had been restructured into professional ones, the way a house is stripped to its frame when you need to rebuild the walls. But there was something particular about seeing it on his chart. Something that landed like a piece of information I hadn't asked for. He had been here 4 days, and no one had come to see him. Not one person. The 4 men outside his door, and the man with the glasses, whose name I had learned by then was Han. They were not visitors. They were infrastructure. I learned this not from his chart, but from him. Or rather, from the way he existed in the room when I came to check his vitals at 5 a.m. after the forged chart had been secured, and a new IV line had been set, and Troy had made 3 phone calls in the hallway that I did not hear the content of, but understood were consequential. He was awake, which should not have surprised me. A man in his position, in a hospital, after what had just been attempted, would not sleep, but the quality of his wakefulness surprised me. He was not on guard. He was not tense. He was simply awake the way a man is awake, who has spent so much time awake that sleep has become the foreign state. I took his blood pressure. I adjusted the new drip rate and confirmed the number out loud, 4 milligrams, and watched his eyes track to the readout, and then back to the ceiling. 4, he said, in English. The first word he'd said to me directly, testing the number, verifying it himself. 4, I said. He nodded once and went back to looking at the ceiling. I should have finished my rounds and let that be the end of it. I had already done the dangerous thing. The dangerous thing was done. Instead, I said, "You should sleep." He said, "You should go. I have 2 more patients on this floor. Then, go to them." I went to them. But when I came back at the end of my rounds to sign off on his chart, the real one, the clean one, the one that now had my initials at every corrected entry, he was still looking at the ceiling, and his jaw was set in the particular way of a man who is not in physical pain, but is in some other kind, and I thought about my father again. About the way my father had looked in his last days, not defeated, not afraid, but exhausted in the specific way of a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and couldn't figure out how to set it down. I said, "When did you last sleep?" A long pause. "What day is it?" I told him. 4 days, he said. "That's not sleep. That's a coma waiting for permission." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. It did not become a smile. But it was the anteroom of one, the place just before, where the possibility of it existed briefly and then was managed back into stillness. "Go home, nurse," he said. "Grant," I said. "My name is Naomi Grant." He looked at me then. Directly, the full weight of it, which was considerable. "Go home, Naomi Grant," he said. Forced proximity. The competence ladder by Thursday I had been formally reassigned. Choi delivered the information at the start of my shift, not as a request, not as a negotiation, but as an accomplished fact. The kind of fact that had been decided in a room I was not in and communicated to me as a courtesy. As of that shift, I was Chem J1's sole assigned nurse. The other patients I had been covering had been redistributed. My hours were adjusted to 12-hour shifts, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., with a secondary nurse available for physical assistance when needed. I had the choice to decline. Choi said this with the same inflection he used for all information. Flat, factual, uncolored by opinion. I understood from the flatness that declining would be understood, and that understanding it would not make it a good idea. I said I understood and went to check on my patient. Rung 1. On Thursday night, the day shift physician left his chart with a new order for a blood panel. Standard. Reasonable. Something I would have ordered myself. I had checked the lab slip twice and was preparing to initial it when I noticed the collection code was wrong by a single digit. Not the test. The routing code. A routing code that, when I cross-referenced the hospital's internal directory, corresponded not to the 7th floor laboratory, but to the private forensic pathology unit that handled samples in cases where results were not shared with the general medical record. Someone was trying to get his blood off the floor. I initialed the lab slip for the correct panel, filed the routed one as a documentation error, and said nothing to anyone that night. The next morning I pulled the 7th floor's after-hours access log and found a badge entry at 4:40 a.m. for a pathology courier who had not been dispatched by this floor or any floor. The badge number belonged to an employee who had been on approved leave for 2 weeks. I put this information in my personal notebook. Not the hospital's system. My own notebook. Spiral-bound, blue cover, which I had been keeping since my 2nd year of nursing school, and which contained every discrepancy I had ever noticed and what I had done about it. I closed the notebook and put it in my bag and went back to his room. Rung 2. It was the following Monday, when he first spoke to me at length. I had come in for my shift to find him sitting up in bed, which was progress, physical progress. The kind I was supposed to report as positive. but sitting up in the particular way of a man who had been trying to stand and had been overruled by his own body, and who was processing the experience of being overruled by something. I checked his incision. I checked his drain. I updated his chart with language that was clinical and precise, and said nothing about the fact that I had noticed he was in pain that had nothing to do with his abdomen. "They think I don't know," he said. I didn't ask who. "What do they think you don't know?" That it was internal. A pause. The shooting. I kept writing in his chart. "That's not a medical question. I'm not asking a medical question." I finished writing. I looked at him. "Do you want me to answer it? I want to know if you know." I thought about what I knew, and what I had the right to say, and what the difference was, in this particular room, between those two things. I know what I've observed. I know that the people trying to change your chart have access to this floor, which requires either an employee credential or a credential that someone with a lot of resources obtained. I know that the access log for Monday night doesn't add up. And I know that the forged signature was good enough to fool someone who wasn't looking for a reason to look. But not you. Not me. He was quiet for a moment. "Why were you looking?" I thought about my father. "Because someone didn't look for me once," I said. "I decided I would always look." He turned that over. I watched him turn it over. The way a thought moved through him was visible in the stillness of his face, paradoxically, the way the movement of wind is visible in the stillness of water. "Han believes there are two people," he said. "Inside, not one." I thought about the lab slip, the routing code, the separate chain of custody that someone had tried to establish. One person accesses the chart. A second person establishes the evidence trail, different skill sets, different levels of access. Same objective. "I think Han might be right," I said. Kim Jae-won looked at me the way he had looked at me the first night, with the recalibrating attention of a man discovering a door he hadn't known was there. Except this time he let it stay open a little longer. "You're not just a nurse," he said. "I'm exactly a nurse," I said. "A nurse who pays attention." Rung 3. Wednesday, 2 a.m. I was reviewing his medication log when the door opened, and a man I had not seen before came in, not through the main door, through the service entrance that connected to the supply corridor, which was supposed to require a code I had memorized and which he had clearly obtained. He was wearing scrubs. He was carrying a syringe. He had not seen me because I was in the chair in the corner, behind the partial wall of the equipment station, and I had been sitting there in the dark reviewing his chart by the light of the monitor and the low orange warmth of the city through the window. He had taken 2 steps toward the bed before I stood up. "Stop," I said. He stopped. He looked at me. He calculated. What he calculated, I think, was that I was a nurse, a black woman in navy scrubs in a hospital room at 2 a.m., and that the calculation in his favor was straightforward. He was bigger than me. He had a syringe containing something that would not stop at one person's chest. He had gotten past 4 trained security professionals and a coded door. What he had not calculated was the 6 months I had spent in a self-defense program that a colleague had dragged me to after I filed my first incident report on this floor and was told to be careful, and the 2 years before that during which I had been quietly, methodically, learning to be the least vulnerable version of myself that it was possible to be in a world that had. Taught me early that vulnerability was a liability I could not afford. I did not have time to call for help, and he knew it. He moved. I moved first. I did not win cleanly. I will not describe it as anything other than what it was. Ugly and fast, and decided by 2 seconds of reaction time, and the fact that I knew exactly where the nerve cluster in a wrist was, and exactly how much pressure it took to make a hand open. The syringe hit the floor. I kicked it under the bed. And then the door opened, and Choi was there. And then 2 more of them were there. And the man in the scrubs was no longer my problem. Kim Jae-won had not moved from the bed. He had been awake. I knew from his eyes that he had been awake. And he had not moved, which was not passivity. It was the controlled stillness of a man who understood that moving would have changed the calculation in a way that did not favor me. He had stayed still for me. When it was over and the room had been cleared and the syringe was in an evidence bag and Choi was on the phone in the hallway, Kim Jae-won said, quietly, "You're bleeding." I looked at my arm. A cut, not deep, from the edge of the equipment station when I had come up out of the chair. "It's fine," I said. "Let me see it." "Let me see it," he said. I crossed the room and held out my arm. His hand came up and wrapped around my forearm, carefully, with a precision that was oddly gentle for a man with hands that size, and he looked at the cut with the same focused attention he gave everything. "It needs a bandage," he said. "I know. I'm a nurse." "You keep saying that," he said, "like it's the It usually is." His thumb moved, once, very slightly, against the inside of my wrist, not deliberately, I thought, or not entirely deliberately. A reflex. The reflex of a man who was accustomed to controlling his hands and had, for 3 seconds, been less in control than usual. I bandaged my arm and wrote the incident in my notebook, and did not write it in his chart, because some things need to be protected until you understand who is safe to tell them to, and I was still learning who that was. Rung 4. Thursday morning, 7 a.m., 1 hour before my shift ended, Han found me at the nurse's station. He set a business card on the counter in front of it. It had a phone number and nothing else. "He wants to know your full name," Han said. "Your full legal name, your nursing license number, your educational background, and every facility you have worked at." A pause. "He is thorough." "So am I," I said. Han picked up his coffee. "Yes," he said. That is why he... External threat. The threat, when it came into focus, was larger than one doctor and one man with a syringe. I had been building the picture in my notebook for 11 days. The access logs, the routing codes, the forged credentials, the patterns of shift coverage, and who was present on this floor when each anomaly occurred. And what I had built was the outline of something organized, not opportunistic. Organized. 2 nurses had requested schedule changes that put them off floor on the nights the chart had been altered. A physician I'd never met had co-signed 2 supply orders for medications that had no record of being administered. The security rotation, which was Jae-won's own people, had a gap of 17 minutes on Monday at 1 a.m. that matched, exactly, the window during which the lab courier with the borrowed badge had accessed the floor. 17 minutes. Long enough to establish 2 independent evidence chains pointing toward a natural death that would never reach an investigation. I brought my notebook to Han. He read every page. He read it the way I had written it, methodically, without expression, page by page, not skimming. When he finished, he set it on the desk and took his glasses off and was quiet for a long moment. "This is thorough," he said. "I told you." "The physician on page 8, he said. "He is not on staff at this hospital." "I know. I checked on Tuesday. His credentials are current with the medical board, but his hospital affiliation hasn't been active for 14 months. Someone reactivated his 7th floor privileges 11 days ago. 4 days before Jae-won was admitted." "Yes." Han put his glasses back on. He looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read. Not warmth, not exactly, but something that sat in the same neighborhood. Consideration, the specific weight of someone who has found something unexpected in a place they thought they knew. "How much of this have you told anyone else?" he said. "No one," I said. "I don't know who is safe to tell." "You told us." "You were already trying to keep him alive," I said. "That puts you in a..." He was quiet for another moment. "Naomi Grant," he said. My full name, the way he said it, carried the particular quality of a name being stored somewhere. "I need to give this to him," I said. "All of it. He has a right to know the shape of it. He already knows some of the shape. He needs to know it's not two people," I said. "It's a team, and at least one of them is still in this building." Declaration I gave Kim J. won the notebook at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, 13 days into a situation that had started with a number on a chart and had expanded, in the time since, into something I did not yet have the right word for. He read it in the bed, sitting up, his back straight in the way I had come to understand was not rigidity but discipline, the posture of a man who had decided at some point that how he held himself was a thing he could control even when other things were not. He read the whole thing. He read it twice. He set it on the blanket and looked at the window. "You did this on your own. I was already paying attention. You did this without telling anyone, without protection. I didn't need protection to keep a notebook." He looked at me. "You needed protection when a man came through the service door with a syringe. I managed that. You shouldn't have had to manage that." Something moved through his voice, not volume, not heat, something lower and more controlled than both of those, the compression of an emotion that did not have permission to expand, that should not have reached you. I was the one in the room. You were in the room because you were protecting me. The word, protecting, landed differently in his mouth than I expected. Not like a statement of debt, like a statement of record. "You were protecting me for 13 days, in a building where someone is trying to kill me, without telling me, without asking for anything." I didn't have a clean answer for that. "You were my patient." "I was your patient," he repeated. He looked at the notebook in his hands. "Naomi, don't," I said. "Don't say whatever you're about to say." He looked at me. The full weight of it again, the specific attention that I had spent 13 nights telling myself was not personal, and was entirely professional, and was absolutely not the thing I was now sitting very still to avoid acknowledging. "Han is moving me out of this building tonight," he said. "Secure location. Everything he needs is in place." A pause. "You are coming with us." "I have a job." "You have a target on your back," he said. "The moment anyone in that team realizes you've been logging their access patterns, you are the problem they need to solve." I knew he was right. I had known he was right for 3 days, and had been choosing not to think about it carefully, because thinking about it carefully led to conclusions I wasn't ready to arrive at. "I'm not going anywhere with you because you decided it," I said. "I know," he said. "I'm going if I decide it. I know that too." He reached to the side table and set something on the blanket in front of me. A phone. Plain, dark, the kind that existed for one purpose. "Han's number is in it," he said. "When you have decided, call him. He will come get you, wherever you are." I looked at the phone. "This isn't how this works," I said. "How does it work?" "I don't know yet," I said. "That's the problem." "Then figure it out," he said. "But figure it out somewhere safe. I am asking you to do that. Not because you owe me anything. Because..." He stopped. He looked at the window. He looked back at me. "Because you are the first person in this building who saw what was happening and moved toward it instead of away from it. And I don't know how to make that not matter to me." The room was very quiet. "Sleep," I said finally, "Naomi, sleep first," I said. "I'll think about the rest." He lay back. Not because I told him to. He did not take instruction from anyone as far as I could observe. He lay back because he had decided to. And for the first time in 13 nights, watching the slow, deliberate way his eyes closed and the particular quality of release that moved through his shoulders as his body finally let itself stop holding everything up. I thought that the most dangerous thing about Kim Jae-won was not his empire or his reputation or the 4 men outside his door. It was the way he looked when the performance stopped. The choice I took the phone. Not because I was afraid, though I was. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because I had an apartment and a bank account and 3 years of a career I had built with my own exhausted hands. Not because someone had decided for me. I took it because I had been paying attention for 13 days, and I knew what I knew. And what I knew was this: the people who move toward danger instead of away from it are rare. I had thought, my whole life, that I was one of them, because I had no other option. That the moving toward was a function of necessity and grief, and the particular stubbornness of a woman who has decided that the thing that broke her will not be allowed to break anyone else. But standing in that room, notebook in his hands, his eyes on mine with that quality of attention that was not want yet, but was everything that came before it, I understood that it was also a choice. A real one, made the same way his stillness was a choice. And the way he had waited instead of moving when the man came through the door was a choice. And the way he had said, "You are the first person who moved toward it," was a choice. He had offered me the phone instead of a command. I called Han from the parking garage at 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the building unlocked its side exits for the morning shift change. Han answered on the second ring. "I know the building," I said. "I know the floor. I know every anomaly in the access logs for the past 2 weeks. If you're going to find the rest of this team, you're going to need that." A pause. "J1 said you would call." "J1 was right," I said. "Don't make him insufferable about it." I heard the sound that was maybe, possibly, briefly, Han almost smiling. "The car is outside," he said. "Gray, corner of 5th and Halsted." I picked up my bag. I walked out of the building I had been making myself invisible inside for 9 months, and into the gray 6 a.m. of a city that smelled like early rain and cold asphalt, and the specific November promise that everything eventually changes. The gray car was where Han said it would be. I got in. Emotional resolution, he was awake when we arrived. Of course he was. The location was not what I had imagined. Not a fortress, not a compound, but a high floor in a building I recognized as one of his hospitality group's properties. A corner unit with windows on 2 sides and the city spread out below like something patient and enormous. Han had someone set up a medical station in the 2nd bedroom, the equipment I would need, the medications in the correct dosages, a new chart in a locked case with only 2 authorized signatures. Mine and Han's. J1 was in the main room, not in bed, in a chair, sitting with the careful economy of movement of a man who was healing and knew the cost of ignoring it. He looked at me when I came in. He looked at my bag, my coat, the way I had my notebook pressed against my chest like a habit I hadn't broken yet. He said nothing. I set my bag down. I crossed the room. I checked his incision, carefully, with the same focused attention I had given it every night for 13 nights. Because some things do not change just because the location does. And I updated my chart with the clean, precise language of a nurse who has always done this correctly. "Vitals are stable," I said. "You need to sleep. Actual sleep, not the ceiling." I know, he said. The ceiling is not going to solve anything. I know that too. I stood up. I looked at the windows and the city and the gray morning that was becoming light. When this is over, I said, I'm going back to work. I know, he said. I'm not. I stopped. I'm not a different person because of this. No, he said. You're exactly who you were. That's why you're here. I looked at him. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me on that first night, with the door open, with whatever was behind it visible in the specific quality of his stillness, and the difference between then and now was that I was no longer pretending not to notice it. Get some sleep, I said. I'll be here. He did not say thank you. He did not say I need you. He simply nodded once, the same nod he'd given the dosage reading on the first morning, the nod of a man confirming something that matters, filed under things that are now known. He slept. For the first time in 4 days, by his own account. I sat in the chair by the window with my notebook open to a clean page, and I wrote down everything I knew about the team inside that building. And I listened to the city wake up below us, and I did not think about how I had gotten here. I thought about where this was going. Some doors once opened. Don't close. End CTA, thank you for being here. My bold hearts and late night keepers. If this story found something in your chest and won't let it go, you know what to do. Leave a like. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Naomi and J1 have traveled tonight. Our dark romance family is in every time zone, and I love every single one of you for being here. What comes next? Let's just say, the team inside that hospital wasn't finished. And neither is she.